In this video, I will play a competitive modern magic tournament with Door to Nothingness combo. If you missed my last video, the generic combo is with Amulet of Vigor. Having multiple amulets on the table means our permanents untap multiple times, so a card like Gruul Turf will add more mana the more amulets we have. Then, we can use one of our 5 mana payoff cards to add more mana to eventually cast Karn the Great Creator to get Door to Nothingness to win. The event we are playing today is 4 rounds long, and players at a record of 3 wins and 1 loss get profitable prizing. If you want a more in-depth guide for this list, then one is up on my Patreon right now. To start the first round, we reveal Gigantha to our opening hand, and our starting 7 is very interesting. Urza's Saga is used in this deck primarily to find Amulet of Vigor. Now we can't play our Gruul Turf or Chamber turn 2 because then we would bounce the Saga to our hand. So I am going to keep this, but this is very slow because we can't play a land on our second turn. The opponent starts off the game with a fetch land, and we are just lucky because we find the Mycosynth Gardens off the top of the deck. Now I can use the colorless mana from Urza's Saga to filter through the Mycosynth Gardens to tap for green to cast the Arboreal Grazer, but it's actually not worth it because I would rather use the Arboreal Grazer when I have multiple Amulet of Vigors in play, because then I get an additional land drop to add a lot of mana with Gruul Turf. So while in the short term this looks like a mistake, in the long term this will pay off with all my Amulet of Vigors coming down next turn. Now things take a weird turn when the opponent misses their second land drop, so they must have just kept a risky opening hand to try and find a land in the top 2 cards, but couldn't find it. So now with an Escape to the Wilds off the top of the deck, and we can get an Amulet of Vigor out of our deck from the Urza's Saga, we can now use the Mycosynth Gardens to copy the Amulet of Vigor, so we now have 2 in play. This means that every time we play a Gruul Turf, it makes 4 mana. Now you can see why we wanted the Arboreal Grazer. Using the Grazer's extra land drop, we add 4 more extra mana, and now we have plenty of mana to cast the Escape to the Wilds. This not only draws us 5 cards, but also lets us play Gruul Turf again. So with the extra land drop from the Escape to the Wilds and the Explore that we found from Exile, we get to add a lot of mana. This will then let us cast the Timeless Lotus, which untaps twice, so that adds 2 of each colored mana, which then we can cast Karn the Great Creator, and get the Sages from our sideboard to untap the Timeless Lotus infinite times, because the Timeless Lotus taps for 5 mana, and we can use 3 mana to untap it. Then we can play the Emrakul the Aeon's Torn and win the game. Now the opponent concedes the match and we move on to boarding. Something important about sideboarding throughout this video is that we will never sideboard. The whole sideboard is dedicated to Karn the Great Creator and Gigantha, so there's nothing to bring in, never anything to bring out. We are solely focused on this combo, and it's why I love this deck so much. Now, I'm not sure why, but again my opponent kept a 1 land hand, so they did have Force of Vigor to destroy 2 of my Amulet of Vigors, but they ended up just conceding to Golos. It was a very boring game, they just had 1 land and had 1 disruptive spell. As you can see, this isn't like a normal Magic Online league, this is a tournament, so now that we are 1-0, we've got to wait for all the other players to complete their matches, which you can see there are some absolute crushers in this event. One to highlight, Cherry X-Man, he is playing in Worlds this year and has qualified for the MOCs as well. Going into the next round, on the draw we have such a tempting triple amulet hand, but because we have triple bounce land in hand, it is just too risky and not worth it, so I'm going to mulligan. What's nice is we have a decent 6 because we have both Urza's Saga, Amulet of Vigor, and Mycosynth Gardens to copy the amulet. Here I decide to bottom the Timeless Lotus because we don't have a bounce land in our hand yet to ramp that out. To start off the game, the opponent plays an island and passes back. With an Ancient Stirrings off the top, I debate between Urza's Saga and Ancient Stirrings on the first turn. I decide here to go for Ancient Stirrings because we are looking for a bounce land, and if we don't find it, I can still play Amulet of Vigor next turn and eventually copy it. I think there's also a good argument to play Urza's Saga turn 1 and then cast the Ancient Stirrings turn 2 with the Mycosynth Gardens, but I definitely overlooked that line. After passing back the turn, the opponent plays a second island and plays a Merfolk Lord, so we now know that we have to kill the opponent as fast as possible because they are going to be attacking me with creatures. Have you ever punted into making the best play possible? Yes, not playing Urza's Saga turn 1 was insane because Merfolk plays so many Spreading Seas effects which would destroy the Urza's Saga. I'm not sure how I came to this line, but I'll take it like a champ. The opponent just plays a second Lord, attacks him for 3, and then passes back. With an Escape to the Wilds off the top, I copy my Amulet of Vigor, play my Gruul Turf, cast Karn the Great Creator, but they do have Force of Negation. Merfolk doing merfolk things, they play another land, play another lord, and attack in for 8. Now with the opponent having lethal on the board, I need to go for the combo and hope they don't have another counterspell. With only 5 mana available to us from the forest and 4 mana from the Gruul Turf, I decide that I'm going to play my Golos first to get Lotus Field out of my deck. This will then add 3 green and 3 red for 6 mana total. I can use 5 of that to cast Escape from the Wilds with 1 mana floating. Now with a bounce land, I have 5 mana to cast the second Escape from the Wilds to hopefully find a way to kill the opponent. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the first Escape to the Wilds got 5 lands, and the second one got more lands, an Amulet, an Arboreal Grazer, and a Golos. So I actually can't really do anything. I did a load of maths. I have 1 extra land drop from the Escape to the Wilds. I can play the Amulet, play the Arboreal Grazer, and get an additional land drop, but I couldn't find a way to realistically do anything. I had the option between trying to activate Golos or putting Jegantha into play, so I decided to put Jegantha into play because I couldn't work out the mana to put Golos activation on the stack. I was actually feeling really good about this spot. With 2 big blockers, a chump blocker, and no lands that they can turn into an island, I thought that I was going to win the game next turn because Jegantha and a load of mana will help me activate Golos a lot of times. But to my surprise, they have a Dismember for the Jegantha on my end step, which actually removes a lot of my mana. After this, the opponent untaps, attacks in with all their creatures, I block 2 of them, and they play an Aether Vial. Now, with the Mycosynth Gardens off the top, again, I don't believe there's anything I can do because the Jegantha is dead, I only have access to 6 mana, and all of these lands. So I think you can call me Warren Buffett for the amount of property I had at the end of this game. Going into game 2, I have to mulligan my opening 7 because leaning on Urza Saga is too risky. Then we have an all bounce land 6, but our 5 is pretty decent. With no red mana to cast the Escape to the Wilds, I decide to keep the Timeless Lotus in hand and bottom the Mycosynth Gardens as well. To start off the game, we play the Urza Saga plus Amulet of Vigor and pass back the turn. The opponent has a turn 1 Curse Catcher, and my deck clearly is not happy with me because I draw a Timeless Lotus for my draw step. Here, I decide to use the Mycosynth Gardens to copy the Amulet of Vigor at sorcery speed because I'm worried about something like Brazen Borrower to bounce the Amulet in response. But things are completely not going my way when the opponent has a Tide Shaper to turn the Urza Saga into an island, essentially ending the game. The opponent managed to get a Hex Catcher on the table to be able to counter anything that I cast, making it a very frustrating loss because we whiffed the top 10 cards of our deck in game 1. Here instantly I went on to CSGO to surf, to chill, and de-tilt because that was definitely an unfortunate match. Being at 1 win and 1 loss going into the 3rd round, I need to win both round 3 and round 4 to be able to get some decent money. Going into the round on the draw, I have to mulligan a no amulet opening 7, and my 6 has the same problem, no amulet, so have to go to 5. Then our 5 has no amulet again, but I don't think going to 4 is super practical, and we are on the draw, so we can't get lucky. There is a good argument to go to 4 because I have 1 mulligans down to 3, but I think we should just play it safe. Fortunately, my opponent is also on a slow draw because I get to cast an Explore on turn 2 to play my bounce land and pass back, and they still have nothing. On their 3rd turn, they do have a Shardless Agent though to get the Crashing Footfalls out of their deck and put 10 power on the board. To our luck though, we managed to find an Amulet of Vigor off the top, making me question if I should have played my bounce land last turn with the Explore. Here I decide to use the Explore again just to try and draw for an extra bounce land, but we don't manage to find it, so I just decide to put 2 amulets on the table. Now I will agree with you, I have 4 mana on the board, no land in hand, I can't cast any spells in my hand, but with the opponent putting me down to 10 and having access to things like Brazen Borrower, Fire Ice, loads of different cards, I decided to go for the high variance play because I don't think we're winning this game if I don't top deck a bounce land. Now I think you forgot who you're watching, because like an absolute beast, we rip a bounce land off the top of the deck. This now adds 4 mana to our mana pool, which we can then use one of our green sources to cast Golos. That can get the Gruul Turf out of our deck, which adds 4 more mana, which we can then cast Timeless Lotus, which adds 10 mana to our mana pool, so we can cast Escape to the Wilds with 5 mana floating, which finds an Ancient Stirrings and a Lotus Field. Starting with the Ancient Stirrings, I managed to find a Karn the Great Creator out of the 5 cards. Now I can use the Lotus Field to add 6 mana to my mana pool. Here I had to decide between casting Karn and activating Go Loss to exile the top 3 cards to cast them for free. I decided, screw it, I'm gonna go for the Go Loss. Using the Go Loss, I found another Karn, so that Karn can then just be cast and used to minus to find Ratchet Bomb to destroy these rhinos as they're 0 CMC. From here, I pass back the turn and the opponent instantly attacks the Karn with both rhinos. I decided to not sacrifice the Ratchet Bomb because it's most likely that they're going to make more rhinos if I do sacrifice it now. Here though, the opponent fetches, plays another land, and casts a Fury to deal damage to my Go Loss, but it doesn't kill it. Now with another Karn and a load of mana, I can actually kill the opponent because I can get infinite mana with the Sages from the sideboard to activate the Go Loss infinite times. Going into game 2, we have a great opening hand with a turn 1 Urza's Saga, with a Mycosynth Gardens to copy the amulet. With the opponent having a slow start, we're looking to be in a decent spot. But with the opponent having Blood Moon mana turn 3, they don't have it and just put 10 power on the board instead. Now the Magic Gods want to redeem me for last match because like an absolute beast I find Amulet of Vigor off the top of the deck. This is insane because we save a mana from copying with the Mycosynth Gardens, so now we can get an Amulet of Vigor out of our deck with Urza's Saga, cast the Amulet of Vigor from our hand, and completely go off. The opponent has Force of Negation, not the best for us, so I think the best thing we can do here is play Mycosynth Gardens and copy the Amulet of Vigor now. While we're not playing around Force of Vigor, we are playing around something like Brazen Borrower. After passing back the turn, the opponent attacks me for 10 and then plays a Murktide Regent and passes back the turn. Things are looking great for us though here, because we have 2 Amulet of Vigors, can have 5 mana, and cast both Escape to the Wilds and Timeless Lotus. From here, I'm just adding as much mana as I possibly can to try and make sure that I can get 15 mana to cast the Emrakul the Aeon's Torn from our hand, which we eventually do because we find an Azusa Lost But Seeking out of the deck. Now after we cast the Emrakul and take the extra turn, the opponent concedes the match. Having 2 wins and 1 loss, it is very important that I win this 3rd round. Being on the play with a turn 1 Urza's Saga, an Azusa, and a Go Loss, it's a decent opening hand, but we do need to find some payoff off the top. With the opponent on a mulligan to 6, I play my Urza's Saga and pass back the turn. The opponent then starts with a Blood Crypt and a Ragavan to put a bit of pressure on me. With nothing better to do but play a Forest and pass back the turn, I'm hoping that they don't have something like a Boseiju or a Thoughtseize to blow me out. Fortunately, all the opponent has is attack in, gets a treasure, casts a Wrenn and 6, pluses on their land, and plays an artifact. Now with an Escape to the Wilds off the top, I'm feeling pretty confident about my spot. Using Urza's Saga, I float a mana and get Amulet of Vigor. That lets me play an Azusa from my hand, which gives me 2 additional land drops. As we have Gruul Turf in our hand, we can play that twice to add 4 mana to our mana pool. Now I'm not sure why, but I completely brain farted here and thought that I had 2 Amulet of Vigors in play. While this video is only 12-13 minutes long, for me this tournament has been over 3 hours, so I was a bit tired and wasn't thinking straight. So after playing the Go Loss thinking I can get Lotus Field to add 6 mana to my mana pool, I realized before taking the card that I am actually not getting any mana from this, so I decided to just get an Urza's Saga and be very far ahead from the opponent because they can't really do anything about my board still. The opponent does use a fetch land to Fatal Push my Azusa and play a Tarmogoyf, but again, not a lot of stuff here that's threatening my hand. If they do find a Boseiju, I may be in an awkward spot though. With an Azusa off the top, I can now play that again, which is quite fortunate because I only play 2 copies, and cast my Escape to the Wilds. Now we don't find a way to play an extra land from the Escape to the Wilds, so with only 2 mana from the Amulet of Vigor, I just play a second Amulet of Vigor and the Ancient Stirrings. Now I think the opponent fetched incorrectly throughout this game because they actually managed to find a Boseiju, but with only 1 green mana, they could only destroy 1 thing, so they killed an amulet and passed back the turn. Now with an Aboil Grazer off the top, we can tap our Urza's Saga for mana, get an Amulet of Vigor out of our deck, and finally kill the opponent. I definitely played this game quite loose, and I could have played it way better, and most likely killed them way sooner, but sometimes you just make mistakes with combo. It was a very trivial kill because we had Timeless Lotus and 3 Amulet of Vigors in play, so all we had to do was play Karn the Great Creator, float a load of mana with the Timeless Lotus, and we had enough mana to both untap the door to Nothingness and activate it. Going into game 2, this deck felt like the buy. The opponent couldn't really do anything to deal with my amulets. While they did have an Engineered Explosives on the table, they just couldn't really do anything fast enough to disrupt me from stop me going off on turn 3. So here what I was going to do is float 6 mana with Lotus Field, and then play Karn the Great Creator and play Chalice the Void on 1, but the opponent conceded the match before I could do so. So that finishes our tournament at 3 wins and 1 loss to get the maximum prizes. As I couldn't record me opening the prizes because I have to wait for all the other players to finish the event, here's me opening 25 chests for you gambling degenerates. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe.